Welcome into Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Fridays. This is the first Friday I haven't been on the road in forever. The bus tour is over. I am looking forward to knocking this out. I got Fox Bet Live here in a little bit. But in the meantime, a bunch of different stories I wanted to dive into with you and discuss. And we begin with, what do you think? The Jussie Smollett finally having a verdict in this case. And I'm going to talk about why I think it is so significant in the grand scheme of things and what exactly is going on there. But let's talk about this right off the top. MSNBC didn't cover this story at all. They didn't even bother to cover this story on any of their primetime programs, even though the jury had rendered a verdict, 5 of the 6 counts guilty of faking a hate crime. Jussie Smollett was. Now, positive side here. We've had 3 high-profile jury cases in recent history. Kyle Rittenhouse, Ahmaud Arbery, and now Jussie Smollett. Now, the Jussie Smollett case, far less significant in terms of what the jury was actually considering. But what I would say is, how about the jury looking at the facts in all 3 cases and rendering what I think is the factually accurate verdict? I want to give a little bit of props here to our jury system. Sometimes when things have existed for a long period of time, we don't really recognize how remarkable they are. Our American judicial system, we believe that 12 random jurors out there are going to be able to be selected and render equal, honest, and forthright justice. And most of the time, we are correct. Every now and then, a jury renders a wrong verdict because juries are made up of people and people are imperfect. But by and large, the wisdom of a 12-person jury is better than the wisdom of a politician, better than the wisdom of any individual media member. And that's what we have seen. The way that Jussie was covered, the way that Kyle Rittenhouse was covered, and the way that Ahmaud Arbery was covered is often sensationalized, not factually accurate. The way that politicians react, and I'm going to read a couple of politician tweets for you here in a moment. But what is remarkable is in all 3 of these high-profile cases, I believe juries got it right. Now, I want to call out lies and misinformation. Right now, did you know that it is still the case that there are tweets up from the Vice President Kamala Harris and also from Joe Biden saying that Jussie Smollett was telling the truth? These tweets aren't in any way marked as misinformation. There is no greater context given by Twitter. Big tech supposedly cares so much about people in positions of power sharing accuracies, yet Kamala Harris saying, Jussie Smollett is one of the kindest, most gentle human beings I know. I'm praying for his quick recovery. This was an attempted modern-day lynching. No one should have to fear for their life because of their sexuality or color of their skin. We must confront this hate. It's a lie. It's misinformation. It's not accurate. Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, still has that tweet up. Joe Biden, President of the United States, tweeted, "What happened today to Jussie Smollett must never be tolerated in this country. We must stand up and demand we no longer give this hate safe harbor, that homophobia and racism have no place on our streets or in our hearts. We're with you, Jussie." Now, both of those tweets are still up. There's also an entire cavalcade of stupidity from people at MSNBC who didn't even bother to cover this verdict. Joy Ann Reid, who is one of the dumbest people in media, said nooses never really disappeared as messages of a very specific kind of terror, but every time they're used, my God, it's chilling. Praying for Jussie's full recovery and for all of us. No mention of the fact that he's a liar. Rashida Tlaib, when one of the most famous black and gay men in America is not safe, the message is clearer than it has ever been. The dangerous lie spewing from the right wing is killing and hurting our people. Thinking of you, Jussie Smollett, and my LGBTQ neighbors. Eric Swalwell. What happened to Jussie Smollett is vile and tragic. Thankfully, he will recover. But hate crimes like this are happening more frequently, egged on by careless, hate-filled rhetoric. We start reducing these crimes by rejecting the speech. Neither can ever be accepted as normal. Cory Booker. The vicious attack on actor Jussie Smollett was an attempted modern-day lynching. I'm glad he's safe. To those in Congress who don't feel the urgency to pass our anti-lynching bill designating lynching as a federal hate crime, I urge you to pay attention. AOC. There is no such thing as racially charged. This attack was not possibly homophobic. It was racist and homophobic. It was a racist and homophobic attack. If you don't like what's happening in our country, then work to change it. It's no one's job to water down or sugarcoat the rise of hate crimes. Lori Lightfoot, mayor of Chicago. My thoughts and prayers are with Jussie Smollett. Everyone deserves to live safely as their true, authentic self in this city. As mayor, I will make sure, regardless of the victim's stature, hate crime incidents and complaints are fully investigated. And, not to be outdone, Bernie Sanders. The racist and homophobic attack on Jussie Smollett is a horrific instance of the surging hostility toward minorities around the country. We must come together to eradicate all forms of bigotry and violence. These tweets are all lies. They are a perfect example of narrative over fact. Don't wait for the actual evidence to come out. Don't spend the time to actually allow investigations to occur. Immediately expect and share with your large audiences a falsehood. It was interesting. The Hill had a poll yesterday that found 26% of people still believed Jussie Smollett. How's that possible? I think it's because a lot of people see the initial coverage and never see the actual follow-up. They see all of the news coverage of the alleged fake hate crime, and they never see that it was, in fact, a fake hate crime. They see it, they believe it, and when stories like these happen, I believe the MSNBCs of the world have an obligation to let their audience know that this story did not actually occur as they reported it. I certainly believe that all these politicians who still have these tweets up have an obligation to correct this as well. Instead, they allow the lies to spread and fester. And by the way, this also brings me back to LeBron James. Remember the fake racial crime that he alleged for the racial slur that was supposedly on his gate? The LA Police Department investigated it. No evidence that it ever happened. That story just got completely memory holed, just like so many other stories. When the facts don't fit the narrative, the story disappears. Remember Michael Bennett, racial profiling by the Las Vegas police that everybody covered as if it were 100% true? Also a lie. So many of these stories are proven to be lies. Remember, what's the incentive structure here for Jussie Smollett? He knew that if he were the victim of a race and homophobic-based attack, that it would be good for his career. There is more demand for race and homophobic crimes than there are actually a supply of them, which is how all these lies come to be. Jussie Smollett was trying to profit off racial division. I believe he should have to go to jail for years. I think he should get the maximum penalty available to him because of what he did was a direct assault upon black, white, Asian, and Hispanic people. And oh, by the way, if you are actually a victim of a racial hate crime or a homophobic hate crime, people are less likely to believe you because of the Jussie Smolletts of the world. The people who should be angriest at Jussie are the people who actually need for race and hate and homophobic crimes to be treated as such. He makes it far more difficult for the people who might actually someday be true victims in this criminal context. I want to give props to my staff at Outkick. We have a lot of people who work very hard at Outkick. And I am incredibly impressed with the work in particular that Joe Kinsey did, allowing two different Penn women's swimmers to come out and tell their story of why they are opposed to having a transgendered swimmer on their team. And I just want to read a couple of quotes here, one in particular that I thought was sad, but also emblematic of why this story matters in the larger context. In particular, we had one of the women speak out and tell her story about what exactly was going on. And this is an amazing quote. It's also wildly inappropriate that we could ever find ourselves here as a sporting public. This Penn women's swimmer said, and again, this is an amazing quote. And by the way, nobody else would do this story. Nobody else in sports media would even allow these women to speak out. I want you to think about that for a minute. Not ESPN, not CBS, not NBC, not Bleacher Report. None of them, other than Outkick, would actually cover this story. None of them would allow women swimmers to speak out against the idea of a biological man setting records in their sport. Here's what she said, one of the girls. When I have kids, I kind of hope they're all boys, because if I have any girls that want to play sports in college, good luck. Their opponents are all going to be biological men saying they're women. Right now we have one, but what if we had three on the team? There'd be three less girls competing. Think about how sad that is. This Penn women's swimmer who loves swimming and has been training for over 20 years, basically, to be a great swimmer, is concerned that if she has daughters, they won't be able to excel in sports. Now, look, there are a lot of different organizations out there that spend a lot of time on the intersection of sports and culture. How come nobody at ESPN has even mentioned this story? Think about that. How come not one person at ESPN has had a real, thoughtful, original discussion about this? I'll tell you, because they're afraid of being branded transphobic. This is a direct assault upon women's athletics. All these people out there that claim to care about Title IX, all these feminists, they're not going to speak out about a man biologically crushing all of these female swimmers. The all-time NCAA records for women potentially are going to be broken by a man. They are going to write him into the record books. Now look, I don't have any problem with people changing their gender. But the reason why we separate men's and women's athletics is because men are bigger, stronger, and faster than women. So how in the world can we justify, as anyone out there who supports sporting competitions at all, how in the world can we justify men crushing, biological men, crushing the records of women and being allowed to compete against them? This represents the death of female athletics. Because if we didn't separate male and female athletics, if we just had unisex competitions, women would not be able to ever make teams. They wouldn't get scholarships. They wouldn't be able to play at all because male athletes are far better. Well, how is allowing male athletes to identify as women and compete against them remotely supportive of Title IX or feminism? You know, I say I'm a feminist all the time, and what I mean by that is I believe that everybody should be treated the exact same. Male, female, gay, straight, white, black, Asian, Hispanic. I don't pull punches or treat anybody differently based on their identity. How many other people in sports media can you say that about? And what in the world is going on that women's athletics is being directly destroyed by transgender athletes, like this one in swimming, being able to compete and dominating? It's a failure of the NCAA. It's a failure of our society. It's a failure of our culture that we are telling women, you can't win. We're going to allow biological men to dominate all of your sports. It's outrageous. It's outlandish. And by the way, these girls and many people in sports media, I'll be quite honest with you, are terrified to actually put their name behind their opinion because they're afraid of being called transphobic or being accused of not being inclusive enough. Well, guess what? There are two sexes when it comes to sports, men's and women's. And if you are not a man or if you are not a woman, you should not be competing against one of the genders on the other side, right? Biologically, whatever your gender is, that should be how you compete forever, in my opinion. And if you don't do that, then you are going to destroy women's athletics. We are going to allow far left-wing transgender agendas to destroy women's ability to compete at the highest level. A couple of news stories. Tony Elliott is headed to UVA. This is interesting to me in a couple of different levels. And the thing that is most interesting to me about it is that now Clemson is going to have to replace a couple of different of their top talents, right? They're going to have to replace Brent Venables, who's gone to Oklahoma, and they're also going to have to replace Tony Elliott, who is going to UVA. And what is going to end up happening here, I think, is Dabo Swinney is going to have to demonstrate once and for all that he is actually an elite level coach. Maybe it's possible that when you actually break it all down, one reason that he had the level of success that he did is because of everything that was surrounding him in terms of his offensive and defensive coordinators and how good they actually are as opposed to his own excellence. We'll see. What has definitely been able to happen and has been wildly successful is many people out there know this. Nick Saban has been constantly able to replace offensive and defensive coordinators. Will this be a situation like that or not? I'm not sure exactly how it's going to shake out, but it is, I believe, worth paying attention to going forward with both Tony Elliott and Brent Venables gone right now. Bruce Pearl has gotten a 2-game suspension for Auburn. I think you have to count that as an overall win for Auburn and for Bruce Pearl. 2-game suspension. This has been a 4-year-long investigation into pay for play. So many different schools involved. I think what this represents in a larger scale is the NCAA is basically going to soon be out of the enforcement business. Because of name, image, and likeness, I think the NCAA investigating cases, seeing whether or not people were paid to play or not, is going to no longer be a substantial component of this overall situation going forward. So we will see exactly how this ends up actually going. Inflation has hit 6.8%. I've got a stats for you here, and I couldn't believe it. Inflation highest level since 1982. It's again at 6.8%, almost 40 years, almost 2 generations since inflation has gotten this high. Why do we have inflation? Because we've printed money like drunken sailors, and eventually there is a consequence towards giving everybody money, and that's what's going on right now with inflation up to 6.8%. Gas prices up 58% since last year. Rental cars. You tried to rent a car anywhere in this country? Up 37%. Used cars. If you tried to buy a used car, prices are up 31%. Hotels, 26%. Steak prices. I love steak. Up 25%. Utilities up 25%. Bacon up 21%. Pork up 17%. Furniture 12%. Fish 11%, new cars 11%, everything is costing more. Coffee 7.5%, apples, milk, flour, rent, all of it's up. And it's important to recognize inflation is a direct assault upon young and very young oftentimes, but certainly low-income workers. The people who make the least money can definitely see the biggest increases in terms of what the cost is for all the products that they have to buy. If you live paycheck to paycheck, if you primarily have to spend most of your income on making purchases, groceries, food, lodging, gas, all of those things, you see the bite coming out of your paycheck on a day-to-day basis. Even I sometimes when I fill up my car now, I'll sit and look at the price of gas, and I can't believe what the total cost is before all is said and done with gas. It's crazy. I don't know how it's going to rectify itself. Big picture, the question is, will Joe Manchin's support Build Back Better, given that inflation continues to get worse? You know what's not going to fix inflation? Pouring trillions of dollars more into the economy. It's just not going to be a solution, no doubt at all about this. Couple of final thoughts here. The Steelers are a mess right now. They got a big win on Sunday against the Ravens. They came back and they lost against the Vikings. Great stat for you. The Vikings have had a touchdown lead or more in every game they've played so far this year. How about the idiotic Chase Claypool celebration when the Steelers were trying to drive to get into a position to potentially tie the game? Chase Claypool celebrates a first down. The ball gets knocked around, and as a result, they're not able to get back on the ball. Next level dumb in a 2-minute offense situation there to be celebrating a first down. Totally, absolutely, ridiculously, indefensibly nonsensical. All right, the Outkick six-pack, I'll also tweet these out. And by the way, I will be live on Fox Bet Live at 5 o'clock Eastern, I believe. No, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central, 4 o'clock Mountain, 3 o'clock on the Pacific time zone. We'll be live on Friday breaking down all the NFL action coming this weekend. I love the Browns -2.5 against the Ravens. I like the Atlanta-Carolina under, the Lions +10 at the Broncos. I like the Bills and the Bucks over 53.5. The Rams plus the points against the Cardinals. And I think my Titans bounce back after 2 bad losses in a row. Put forward a good effort and a good performance against the Jags. I like the Titans minus the points in that game, which will be taking place on Sunday. There's my NFL Outkick six-pack. I'll tweet it out. I appreciate all of you. I'll be on Fox Bet Live on FS1 in a little bit. Encourage you, download and subscribe to the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton podcast. November all-time highs. And I want to thank you, by the way. I've got stats here. I've got stats here for you in terms of how many people are supporting us right now. We have the #1 radio show in markets Houston, Phoenix, San Diego, Sacramento, Salt Lake City, Raleigh-Durham, Memphis, Louisville, Birmingham, and others. But all of those markets I just ran through, the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show is #1. Let me repeat all that. Houston, Phoenix, San Diego, Sacramento, Salt Lake City, Raleigh-Durham, Memphis, Louisville, and Birmingham. That is awesome. I appreciate all of you listening all over the country. Appreciate all of you watching these videos as well. My name is Clay Travis. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. This